Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome back. Yes, we are doing another new horror movies roundup. Yes, with another 5 films that we've gotten to see over the last few weeks. One of them we saw quite a while ago, but it is just now hitting VOD. So, Luke really liked the last one we did. You guys really liked the last one we did, and he suggested, hey man, why don't we knock a few more of these out so we can focus up on the December to Dismember content over the next 2 weeks. And I just said, you know what, sir? You're a genius. Let's do it. And that's what we're here to do. We got 5 movies, plus a little bonus one at the end. We're going to talk very briefly about one last film. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to this. I think this is a fun format. Luke, you brought this up. Are you excited to talk about these movies today, man?
Not at all. No, of course I am. Looking at it, sometimes we dedicate such a big block of time to singular reviews, but, sometimes there are films out there where there's some things to talk about. Maybe there's not enough to dedicate an entire solo video to. And we've gotten a little bit backlogged with some of the films that we've had. We've just had so many screeners. Obviously, Nosferatu coming up unexpectedly. Werewolves coverage, everything like that. So, we've had a lot of films in our back pocket waiting to chat about. So we even had we almost sat down and did some singular reviews for some of these. And then we kind of started, brainstorming and saying, hey, let's just do a big list, because we do a list at the beginning of the month. We do lists all the time on the channel. So I think these are 5 interesting films that we could have compile into just one big video.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's hop into it with the first film. Kicking things off with The Soul Eater. Yes, this is something that we actually saw back at Fantasia Fest many, many months ago. That was back in like July, August, somewhere around there. But yeah, we saw this forever ago. We actually shot a full-blown review for this. No idea what happened with StreamYard. But like when I went back to edit this, we sounded like robots. Like it was jittery and janky, and it was for both of us through the whole recording. So that never materialized. And of course, when you're doing a festival, we have found out very quickly that if you don't get the review out right away, you're just going to keep pushing it back further and further. And it just so happens that this film is coming out on VOD soon. So Luke, how you feeling about The Soul Eater?
When we got into this one, I think when we got a little bit of a pile of films, I think when we had initially reviewed this one, and I'll say out of the pile, this one was my favorite, but it wasn't something that I'm going to go back to. I think this one has a great sense of eeriness. It really kind of takes advantage of the town and this looming sense of dread, but it starts to lose something as we get farther down the line in terms of that narrative. But it's very beautifully shot. I think there's a lot of great landscape. I know that there is one great hallway shot in this that is very lit, very beautifully, and some memorable imagery. But overall, it just didn't work in terms of the story, the direction they go to. It just felt a little underwhelming from what's presented, especially when you look at that poster and it kind of gets you excited for what could be in this film.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one for the most part. I really appreciated, we just saw Longlegs not too long before I think we saw this one. And it's kind of one of those things where they're mixing again the horror with kind of a crime story. Because like for those of you who aren't aware, essentially the plot synopsis is when violent and gruesome deaths start plaguing a small mountain village, an old legend about a malevolent creature resurfaces. So you guys knowing me, creature features, I was like, let's get into this. Now, does it fully deliver on that concept? I don't think so. They definitely go for something a bit more cerebral that then kind of turns into something that is a bit of a rug pull, we'll say. And I don't think it's bad, but it definitely started off with a lot of energy, a lot of intrigue, a lot of that atmosphere that I was enjoying. And the more we got out of it, the more the reveals came. It just kind of fell down a few notches. Again, not a bad film, but certainly something that started off with a lot of promise and just kind of left me at the end of it saying, well, I'm glad I watched it. I would probably at least offer it up to some people. Some people I know might be interested in it, but this isn't something that I'm raving about.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think it runs a little bit long. I think the tension that they build up at the beginning does not necessarily pay off toward the back half of the film. There's a great background shot. I don't want to get into it, but it, again, builds your expectations of what could be. There's some great gore in here as well. It's a very competent kind of French horror thriller, I guess you would say. But I don't know necessarily if I will revisit this one regularly. So for me, this one's just worth a watch.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you, Luke. I'm gonna give this one worth a watch. And do you know when this one's popping up on VOD?
VOD on December 10th.
Awesome. So yeah, as of we're recording this, and by the time this thing's out, it'll already be available for you to check out. Alrighty, and coming into our number 2 spot here, we have The Black Cab, which came out last month. We actually got a screener for it, and again, this was one that we were interested in it because of course, Nick Frost. It seemed like it had a very odd-looking story, but when we actually sat down and watched this, I got to be honest here. It was just okay. This is one of those movies that I think didn't necessarily have me fully on board with the concept. It was more because of the casting choice that I was excited to check it out. And as they're getting into it, it's got some interesting ideas that I don't think fully work and don't mesh completely well. What I will say is the complete bright spot of this movie for me is Nick Frost. He does play a really interesting bad guy in this. And I mean, he's just been in a lot of horror recently. So I'm always excited to see what he does. And this one, he's definitely on the meaner side. And it's a really nice change of pace for him. But overall, I found the movie to be rather unimpressive.
I'm right there with you. The performance by Nick Frost was what really sold me on this film in terms of, being able to turn this one on and find some enjoyment out of it. I think there's more of a combative tone here where you kind of have the psychological aspects, kind of thriller elements, but then they inject this kind of supernatural element that doesn't really mesh with the film itself. And it just kind of compromises your viewing, I think. So, at least from my end, it didn't really work from that aspect. But Nick Frost puts on an absolutely lovely performance, with where he dives down these darker avenues. He really does sell that. I would have loved to have seen, them really take advantage of that aspect of it. I know he's in that film Getaway, which seems like more of a lighter tone, at least from the trailer. They could dive into some dark elements there. And he also wrote that film, but I'm excited for him to deep dive into the horror realm here and see what he does provide, because his performance in Black Cab, while overall the film didn't work, his performance is an absolute shining light.
100%. Yeah, I definitely hope to see more horror from Nick Frost over the next year or so. I'd really like to see him tackle more bad guy, kind of like antagonist roles, because I think he did knock that part out real well. But again, it's just a film that I think, even though I wasn't super into it, it starts off with a little bit of promise at least, but I think like you quickly start to lose that, and then you really are just kind of waiting for the next outburst from Nick Frost as the film goes on. And I think this is just conceptually kind of messy. They're trying to mix a few different subgenres of horror here, and I just don't think they built on each other as well as they thought. It's like some movies can get away with this. I would compare like The Black Phone, where it's kind of like supernatural, kind of thrillery stuff. And I think like that really gets away with it. But this one, not so much. So for me, I'm going to say, with the performance in mind, this is going to be a proceed with caution.
Yes, and overall, the film, like I said, narratively, it doesn't work. I think when you look at the film itself, this easily could have been, if you wanted to make a short and just kind of have some fun with it, I think that aspect would have been great. This runs a little bit long for what they do give you, and it's not enough. It's, you could have really taken advantage of it, and from that trailer, wonder where they're going to go with this. I'm a big fan of the film Collateral, and I thought maybe we get some sort of tones like that in here, but I didn't really feel that other than the great Nick Frost performance. There isn't really much here, so I'm going to go with proceed with caution as well. I think, some people might find some enjoyment out of it, but I don't think there's really any rewatch value there.
Yeah, and you guys can catch this one on Shudder, available now. And moving right along, we are into our number 3 spot here with a very recent addition with Breathing In. Yes, this is a Screambox exclusive that we got a chance to check out. I gotta say, I saw this trailer on Instagram, on their Instagram page, and it just oozes that kind of gothic horror from that trailer, and that's very much what you get in this movie. But unfortunately, this one is a tad too slow for me, and I honestly can say that the payoff from that slowness that they build to really left me saying, I just don't think it was really worth the hour and 45 minutes I invested into this. It's really beautifully shot. I would say it's definitely on the higher end of the exclusives that Screenbox has acquired as far as visuals go. They definitely knew what they were doing there. I like the setting of this being in 18th century early 19th century South Africa, and there's a little bit of a folklory kind of tale in this that I think is cool, but a little too inside baseball. I feel like I should have had a history lesson before I sat down and watched this movie so I could maybe get a little more out of it, and that's never a good sign.
Certainly, certainly. And for this being an hour 45, I expected a little bit more from that narrative. Like you said, this is rather slow moving, and you really do feel that runtime, especially for what they give you. They don't deep dive enough, at least for my taste. I thought we were going to get something more expansive here, especially when you're looking at 1901 South Africa. I thought maybe we would take advantage. And I know budgets are tight sometimes, which I'm guessing this film was. This is a very confined story. We're only really dealing with, three characters for the most part, other than just a handful of maybe side characters, and that's being generous. But there really isn't enough here. While I was watching this, I was really like, the narrative here seems to be spinning its tires. We're really just kind of padding runtime almost, because I don't think there's enough character development here and really drawing out that narrative. Like you said, I think there's something missing. Maybe we should have done more research, but it didn't really set the table enough for us to really understand the message there, or what exactly is going on, if this is actually tied to some deep-rooted folklore. So it was a shame, because as this film started, this takes, the relationship between the mother and daughter here really had me intrigued. It was very tense, and there are some beautiful shots in here. So at least for the first 20 minutes here, I was like, I'm really excited to see where this film's going to take me. Unfortunately, it does not take me far enough. It just really didn't do it for me.
Yeah, you're waiting for the shoe to drop, and ultimately, I just feel like it never quite gets there. But I do think that there is going to be some things to take away from people who may be more familiar with the kind of, things they're dealing with as far as their plot with horror here goes. I really want to lean on the fact that I think that all the elements are here, but I don't think they meshed quite well. I just don't think, very similar to the Black Cab, I just don't think that they quite knew how they were going to tell their story and make it very tangible for the audience. I would say more so at this one, it's a maybe overcomplicating things and just holding back a little too much on really, I guess, the hand-holdy aspect, which I know some people are going to be like, oh, wow, you need your handheld. It's like, no, I just would like this to do a little something more than what we got. So that's what I'm looking for.
I think you need to set the table a little bit better in terms of payoffs here. Looking at it, I was expecting maybe something more from the ending as well. When you look at it, I think if you sit there and think about it, you can kind of see where the ending is going. There's really nothing that's going to catch you off guard there. So I felt it rather underwhelming from that aspect as well. There just isn't enough here. This was something like I said with the Black Cab. This could have been an adequate short film, but for an hour 45, I'm expecting more. And this one I watched in 2 sittings, and
Same. Yep.
this one's on Screenbox. And usually when you break up those sittings, it can be like, well, it's not that bad. The pacing's not that bad. But honestly, both sittings, I felt that runtime. So for me, this one's proceed with caution.
Yeah, it's a very generous proceed with caution for me as well. It's, again, I think I give it that just because, again, visually it's all there. The performances are strong. It's just when you get down to that narrative, the most important piece to any pie, it's just not working for us. But let us know down below if you guys are interested in this one. If maybe you're a bit more nuanced in your folk horror endeavors, maybe you pull a little something more out of it, and you guys can catch this one on Screenbox right now. And taking the number 4 spot, we have The Naughty List of Mr. Scrooge. I always want to call this something else, but The Naughty List of Mr. Scrooge. Yes, this is one that Bloody Disgusting reported on, and I knew right away, I haven't been seeing a lot of Christmas horror movies popping up, like Christmas slashers, I should say, as much as we've gotten in years past since we started the channel. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pursue this. I reached out to the folks over at Terror Films, and they gladly were so generous to set us up with a screener and do it really early. So this is a fun one. I got to say, after stepping out of this was probably on the list here, the most fun I had with a horror movie. Now, it's not to say that it's anything groundbreaking. and it's not to say that it's doing anything all that different. But if you want to talk about just taking the concept of that kind of whodunit slasher and just giving you a seasonal like slasher film that's just really neat with a really creepy guy in a Mr. Scrooge mask, this one it checked all the boxes for me. I had quite a bit of fun with this one.
Yes, and this is a very traditional slasher. Like you said, not breaking any barriers, not breaking the mold in any sense. This is really just taking the undertones of what we know from the 80s, 90s and implementing them into more of a holiday slasher. And looking at last year, that really caught us off guard because we were like, "Man, it's going to be a light month," and then we had a lot of screeners rolling in. Now it was underwhelming from what we had seen last year, but this year certainly I was expecting more in terms of more traditional horror slashers taking advantage of the seasonal time, but we haven't really gotten any. So as soon as we saw the naughty list of Mr. Scrooge pop up, I was really excited. And plus, with that slasher design with the old looking Scrooge mask, it's really terrifying. I mentioned it in, the top 5 films that were, or top 6, I think. I can't even remember what the number is, but for December, this one did really catch my intrigue. I was excited for it. Again, there's a low bar when it comes to holiday horror for me. There's just a couple boxes you have to check for me to enjoy it. And I'll say this one did tap into that DNA. Didn't fully do it for me, but I did have a lot of fun with some of the kills and just the slasher design itself.
This one is a total party film, in my opinion. This is one that if you're sitting back with some family members, some cousins, you guys are indulging in a little bit of the devil's lettuce or eating some Christmas cookies or drinking some Christmas ale, you could totally throw this one on and just have a hell of a time just trying to decide, who's the killer and what's going on there. That's exactly how I would like to experience this movie. Just watching it with friends, watching it with family, it's definitely following in those kind of Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer kind of vibes, where they're just really trying to lay up and just say, like, who's the killer. There are a couple elements in here that I really liked. Like there's an element involving some gifts that are laid out for our characters. I thought that scene was really fun. It was a nice way to kind of parse out information to us that they weren't just giving to us. And I gotta say, looking at it and seeing kind of the same films that you'd find in this vein, you can seriously tell that there was an attempt to actually think it through and actually bring us, something a little different, a little interesting when it comes to that part of it. They didn't just tell us the story of this is why all this stuff is happening just in a conversation. It was, we're going to do it piece by piece. And I really appreciate that scene. Again, as far as the reveals go and everything, it's nothing that's going to absolutely blow your mind. And it's nothing that's really, all that like, oh, wow, shocking or anything at the end of it. But it is servicing the story they're trying to tell. And again, it's just a slasher set around Christmas time with a Mr. Scrooge themed killer. And you know what? I dig the costume. I dig the mask. A couple of these kills were pretty fun. And yeah, I definitely could see this one if I found it on like a sale, or maybe even next year around this time. If I just want to throw something on in the background to kind of have some fun or show some friends, I might put on the naughty list of Mr. Scrooge at least one more time.
Certainly. I did have some fun with this one. Didn't check every box I needed to. A little lighter on the gore than I expected, but you can't really, with budgets being what they are, you can't really go above and beyond. You kind of just have to service the story and get through to the next beat of the film. And this one, they really just do stack up a cast of characters to be dispatched by our slasher. So this, like I said, this taps into that traditional slasher DNA that we do have. This kind of remind me a little bit of Stage Fright from the 80s. So am I gonna go back and rewatch this regularly? Probably not, but I think I could turn this on into my holiday rotation. Never gonna be the showcase of the film that I'm gonna want to watch, but during the December month, I could easily throw this on as just some background noise and have some fun with it. So for me, this one is worth a watch.
Yeah, I'm going to follow that up with you with a worth a watch. I think that's a very fair rating for this. And yeah, I think that this is going to be quite a bit of fun. This one I know is coming to VOD on the 20th. So yes, this one is you do have to wait just a little bit, but hey, like I said, if you're sitting around with family members, friends, you're looking for just a fun little whodunit slasher that you haven't seen before, maybe put on the naughty list of Mr. Scrooge and just have a good time with it. And rounding out our 5 films, we have Itch, which we'll be upfront by saying Does not have an official release date, I believe, for VOD. This one just had its premiere the other day. They're getting this out to critics, and this is one that you know we saw it and we just said, this is could be fun. This could be interesting. To give you a little bit of a synopsis on this one, since there's not a lot to it or not a lot that's out there right now. It's amid a mysterious and deadly outbreak called the Itch. A widower and his estranged young daughter take sanctuary in a department store, only to realize the real terror is inside with them. And, I think that this film, for me, I'm of kind of two minds with it right now. I just finished watching it yesterday, so I've still kind of been processing some of it. I will say there's a lot of gore in this one, and I thought that was pretty well executed. As for me not seeing a ton of gory movies recently, that's one where it's like, hey, I could definitely key into some of that. They do have some good effects there. As far as the story and everything goes, there's not a lot here really to grab onto. It's a pretty simple tale. It's kind of going for that Train to Busan-esque story where it's like, obviously you have the dad and his daughter, and they're just kind of in this situation dealing with these zombie virus outbreak type thing. And, overall, I thought that the movie was just really poorly paced. And it's not the fact that it's slow, it's that this movie feels like it's on like fast forward for like so much of it. Like I was just like literally double taking as I'm watching this, like, why are we moving so fast? Like everything is just going and going and going. And it was a really tough one to sit through. I found it to be kind of frustrating at times with just how this thing was paced. Overall though, I do gotta say it's not the worst film I've seen in the world. Like once I actually kind of caught into it a little bit more, I think that there's definitely always an intrigue for me with these kind of virus zombie films, and I thought that at least they attempted to slightly set themselves apart.
And going into this one, I always talk about, finding your groove when you're watching a film and really kind of getting locked in. I did have a lot of trouble getting locked in with The Itch. It just was something where, like you were talking about the pacing aspect of it, and I didn't necessarily notice it all the time, but when we kind of get into more heartfelt moments of when you want to resonate with these characters and you're kind of really in that moment with them, I kind of felt that it was a little forced. It just didn't feel like it was earned enough because we are kind of moving from one event to the next event. And, when you have such a confined tale like this, I would expect maybe a little bit more character development. I was excited, because I have a daughter, and the father-daughter tales for me usually resonate pretty heavily. And I think I did find some elements in there that did resonate, but overall, I was hoping for a little bit more. I was hoping for maybe some deeper connective tissue, and they do cover a decent amount of ground for the characters that they do have. But I just think they didn't pace out their moments well enough for us as an audience to really, get lost in those emotions that they wanted us to and make it feel a little bit more when we get to those gory elements. And I'm with you with the gore aspect. They handled their gore way better than I expected. There's some close-up shots of some things, and it really makes you feel gross at certain times, like almost something's crawling on you. You know how we talked about Infested before. It kind of got that vibe for me in certain aspects of it. So, you know, I I had a trouble with pacing, and I don't think the story was 100% there for me. It just kind of became a little bit of a chore for me to watch this one.
Yeah, and like I said, this one is definitely more of a display of just kind of some of the elements that they're able to bring with a very bare bones, simple concept of a story. But I definitely think if you want to look at this as just kind of like a template for a team coming together, making a film to kind of platform themselves, it's not bad, and I do applaud them for not going the complete traditional route with the virus zombie kind of thing that they're tackling here, trying to take a little bit more of that. You know, interesting different approach is always welcome in that subgenre for me. And yeah, I mean, they knocked the gore out of the park for the most part. I mean, this thing opens and I was like, oh shit, what am I getting myself into? Because like they open with one sequence with a character and their fingernails, and it's like, oh, that's a something right there. And I've been talking about a lot of disturbing horror movies, more emotionally damaging films lately as opposed to the gory ones, but I did just do a bunch of gross horror movie things, and I'll tell you, that scene, especially that one right off the rip, and when a woman walks into the store, um, really got to me there, and it just kind of keeps amping up from there. So I think The Itch for me is going to be a proceed with caution. I think that this is definitely going to hit with some folks, but I don't think it's totally going to land with everybody. I think a lot of people will probably feel the same way we did about that pacing. And I think that it just needed, no pun intended, a little more meat on the bone when it comes to just kind of what they were doing. But again, very low budget film. I applaud them for doing what they did and executing some of those elements very well.
Yeah, and I think this is a film where you can really kind of pick out those budgetary moments where like, oh, they're doing this because of the budget. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I think I wanted more from the story. I thought those elements of confinement could have been amped up a little bit more and really amplify the terror there. The sound design here was a little awkward for me because we're kind of hearing
Yeah.
things on the outside. They just didn't feel natural. It felt like almost like you're throwing in sound effects. And I understand why they did it. You can't really show an expansive universe in terms of when you have a smaller budget. So I understand why they did it, but it just the sound design there was a little bit jarring for me and didn't really do it. But they did knock the gore aspects out of the park there. I did resonate at least a little bit with the father to daughter tale. I think toward the end of it is where it started more so connecting for me.
Yeah. It gets
But
better.
it was a little bit too late for me at that moment. So I'm gonna go with proceed with caution as well. Just know what you're getting into. Or for me, zombie flicks can be a little bit exhausting. I did find some, while it was a different take, it was still reminiscent of some of the zombie things that I have seen in the past. But overall, I think this one, some people could find some enjoyment out of it. So proceed with caution.
Awesome, awesome. And coming in for just a little bonus review, kind of doing a little bit more housekeeping here. This one, admittedly, was one that we saw a very long time ago. We got a screener initially for its initial run, and then they got, thankfully for them, picked up by a little studio. So they were able to actually distribute the film, and it is available on VOD, and that is The Forest Hills. This is a film by a gentleman named Scott Goldberg, who's been championing us, and I just really needed to finish this out, at least talk about the film a little bit. And, this caught our interest immediately because when it was first announced, we knew it's a werewolf movie. And when you sit down and watch this movie, it's something that we kind of talked about a little bit in our werewolves review, where it's a werewolf movie, but they're doing something a little different with it. It's not a pure werewolf film. They're really going in for more of kind of that messaging kind of thing without diving too deep into spoilers. And for me, this film really didn't work for me on that angle. I think it's so low budget, and it's so just people really trying their best to piece something together here, that I think it's an admirable attempt, and I think that that's something I can give them off the rip. But I just think conceptually, this is, even if it had a bigger budget, I don't think that this would have worked for me on the whole, just because I think it's just kind of an idea that doesn't necessarily get me excited once it actually comes to a head and gets revealed. And the thing about it too is it gets revealed so early that I found myself kind of scratching my head a lot towards the middle and end of this film.
Certainly, a bit of a fever dream of a film, I would say. It was just kind of a little bit jumbled for me. I never really locked in on this one. Some of the tones just did not hit. I think performance-wise, it was fairly weak. We do have Edward Furlong and Shelley Duvall in here as well. I don't know necessarily if they were made great usage of either. Edward Furlong for me just, I don't know. That performance did not work at all. His character did not work at all. I just didn't really feel it at all with this film. It was, and it's short. It's like what, an hour 20 maybe.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very, very short. It's, yeah, an hour 19.
and it just wasn't something that there was enough there to justify the story, I don't think. So this one, it was rough. It was a rough film to get through. Making films is hard. I just don't know if the vision was there to really complete it.
Yeah, and this one too, I cannot stress this enough, that if you are interested in this and you are going in to watch it, it is very much an experimental kind of film in a lot of ways, because they do a lot of interesting decisions with their editing and how they kind of structure the story, and how some characters come in and some characters go. I have to say it was very off-putting at times, and I had more fun, I think, watching it, just because of just how odd everything was. And I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the same experience for some people, but in my heart of hearts, I have to be real and just say, hey, this one at the end of the day doesn't really work for me. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to give the Forest Hills a slash it. And I do that just because, again, it's nice that they were able to get people like Edward Furlong and Shelley Duvall back on the big screen. But again, they're just not that big. They're not a huge part of the movie. And then also what they end up doing with their werewolf, which could have been the saving grace for me. I like really low budget movies, especially ones that are involving creatures. I get some kind of an enjoyment there, but it just felt like the concept was a little bigger than the shoes they could fill.
Certainly, certainly. I'm going to have to give this one a slash it as well. I just did not find this one fun. And when we're going into werewolf films, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking just to have a great time, or a rather intriguing subtext to it. And I just don't think it was there enough. It just wasn't pulled off with the grace that I think it should have been. So yeah, slash it for me. This one was a rough watch.
Yeah, but nonetheless, we are happy that we got to check it out, and it's definitely, again, awesome that they went out there with little to no money and got this thing done. So I at least give them all the credit in the world for that. So, and there you have it, folks. There are 5 new horror movies you can check out over the next month here. Again, most of these streaming, and our little bonus review for The Forest Hills as well. That is also streaming on VOD at the moment. The only one I think you really have to wait for is Scrooge, and that one again is coming out December 20th. So keep your eye out for these. I really like doing this. I think this is a fun format. Let us know down below if you guys like this. Again, this is just kind of something that we'll maybe do occasionally, just when we have kind of a backlog of films that are all kind of piling up. You'll probably see these more or less whenever we're tackling a festival or kind of have some bigger content things lined up on the channel, just because it gets hard to review all these movies and at the same time get some of this extra content out to you. So I think this works really well for me. I at least enjoy recording these. So.
Oh yeah, certainly, certainly. I love kind of just going through, giving you a grab bag of sorts, maybe some stocking stuffers here in the month of December of maybe what you should dedicate some time to, as well as your cash flow, I suppose. I know money's tight in the month of December for a lot of people, but I enjoy kind of covering a lot of films rather than just kind of doubling down on one film for an expansive time. So, this one, some intriguing films, some noble attempts, if you will. But overall, I think December could be a fun month for horror fans.
I think so too. And then obviously, yeah, you're going to go back and you're going to watch your classics. You're going to watch, some of the older slashers, some of the older horror films like Krampus and things that are kind of filling our stockings at this moment in time. And of course, you got your classics like Gremlins and other stuff that will be there. And I'm excited. I'm definitely looking forward to watching some of these. Yeah, it's been a good month so far. And then of course, in the theaters, you got Werewolves, you got Nosferatu, lots of good stuff. And there's lots of great stuff on the channel right now. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for more content on the way. But if you need something to hold you over, I did 2 lists over the last week or so here, going over disturbing films that I'll never watch again. Thank you guys so much for the support on that. Luke has a very, very exciting list coming at the end of the week here. I'm looking forward to. And then we're going to be getting into December to Dismember. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And that's going to wrap us up here. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, slash ass. 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 Splattercast, slash ass.